Imagine being invited to a royal feast, golden goblets, rich perfumes, and dishes fit for a king. But this wasn't just any feast. It was a divine setup. Queen Esther, the Jewish queen of Persia, had carefully planned this banquet not just to impress, but to outmaneuver a deadly enemy. As the guests settled, Haman, the king's most powerful official, reclined at the table, savoring his own triumph, unaware that this meal would seal his fate. The wine flowed, the aroma of roasted lamb filled the air, and Esther smiled, waiting for the perfect moment. But what was really on the menu that night? And why did it change the course of history? Stay with me, because this feast was more than just food, it was a battle strategy in disguise. The story is in the Book of Esther. The palace of King Ahasuerus was a marvel of Persian grandeur, golden pillars, embroidered tapestries, and an atmosphere thick with the scent of myrrh and cinnamon. But on this particular evening, the air carried something more than luxury, it carried tension, the weight of unspoken words, and the expectation of something monumental. Queen Esther, clothed in royal splendor, stood at the center of it all. Every detail of the banquet had been planned with precision, because this was not just a feast. It was a battleground. But how did it all come to this? Esther had not always lived in the palace. She was once a simple Jewish girl, Hadassah, raised by her cousin Mordecai after her parents died. Through a divine twist of fate, she was chosen to be queen after the former queen, Vashti, was deposed. However, there was a dangerous secret: Esther was a Jew, and in Persia, being Jewish was about to become a death sentence. Haman, the king's highest official, had manipulated King Ahasuerus into signing a decree that called for the extermination of all Jews in the empire. Unbeknownst to Haman, Queen Esther herself belonged to the very people he sought to destroy. But Esther knew she could not act recklessly. The Persian court was a place of intrigue, where a single wrong move could mean death. Even for a queen, approaching the king without being summoned was a crime punishable by execution unless he extended his golden scepter in mercy. So she fasted. For 3 days, Esther and her people neither ate nor drank. And then, with a heart pounding in her chest, she stepped into the king's throne room, hoping for favor. Ahasuerus, captivated by her beauty and grace, extended his golden scepter. Esther was safe, for now. But she knew this battle required strategy. Instead of immediately pleading for her people's lives, she did something unexpected. She invited the king and Haman to a feast. The first banquet was lavish. Golden goblets brimming with wine, roasted meats spiced to perfection, baskets of figs and pomegranates all set upon gleaming marble tables. Ahasuerus, pleased by Esther's hospitality, asked her what she wanted, promising to grant even half of his kingdom. But Esther did not make her request yet. Instead, she invited the king and Haman to another feast the next night. Haman left that banquet brimming with pride. The queen had singled him out for such an honor, but his joy was short-lived. On his way home, he saw Mordecai, the Jew who refused to bow before him. Fury burned in his chest. That night, he ordered the construction of a massive gallows, intending to have Mordecai hanged the next day. But God had other plans. That very night, the king could not sleep. He ordered the royal records to be read to him, and there, in the dusty scrolls, he discovered something shocking. Mordecai had once saved his life by uncovering an assassination plot, yet had never been rewarded. Determined to correct this oversight, the king called for Haman early the next morning and asked, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Thinking the king was referring to him, Haman suggested an extravagant public display, dressing the man in royal robes, placing him on the king's horse, and parading him through the streets. To Haman's horror, the king commanded him to do exactly that for Mordecai. Humiliated, Haman returned home in disgrace. But he had no time to dwell on his misfortune. He had another royal banquet to attend. The night of the second feast arrived, and the tension in the air was palpable. The royal dining hall was a masterpiece of opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the polished floors, the aroma of saffron-infused lamb and honeyed dates filled the air, and musicians played soft melodies in the background. Haman, still shaken from the morning's humiliation, tried to compose himself. But as he reclined on his cushion, he had no idea that this would be his last meal as a free man. Once again, the king turned to Esther. "What is your request, my queen?" even up to half the kingdom, it shall be granted." Esther took a deep breath. The moment had come. She lifted her eyes to the king and spoke. "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given to me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated." Ahasuerus's face darkened with fury. Who is he, and where is he, who would dare to do such a thing? Esther turned her gaze toward Haman. The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Silence fell over the room. Haman's face drained of color as realization dawned. The queen, whom he had thought was merely a tool in his rise to power, was, in fact, the greatest threat to his ambition. The king, furious, stormed out into the palace gardens. Haman, knowing his fate was sealed, threw himself at Esther's feet, begging for mercy. But in a cruel twist of fate, as he fell onto the couch where Esther sat, the king re-entered the room. Seeing Haman draped over the queen, Ahasuerus roared, "Will he even assault the queen while I am in the house?" It was over. The guards seized Haman, and as if divine justice had been watching all along, one of the eunuchs spoke up. "Behold, Haman has built gallows 50 cubits high for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf." Ahasuerus's rage burned hotter. "Hang him on it." And just like that, the gallows meant for Mordecai became Haman's own execution stage. Esther's banquet was not just about food, it was about divine timing, wisdom, and courage. She understood that words alone would not be enough to save her people. She needed a strategy, one that required patience, humility, and faith. By using hospitality as a weapon, Esther led her enemy into a trap he set for himself. She did not confront the king in anger, nor did she rush her request. Instead, she let the feast do the work, setting the stage for Haman to be ensnared by his own pride. Here are the lessons from the story. 1. Esther had the perfect opportunity to make her request during the first banquet, yet she waited. It wasn't hesitation or fear, it was wisdom. She understood that timing plays a crucial role in success. If she had spoken too soon, the king's heart might not have been fully prepared, and Haman would have had time to counter her move. Instead, she allowed tension to build, creating the perfect moment for her plea. This teaches us a vital lesson: not every opportunity is the right moment to act. Sometimes, we must wait for God's perfect timing, even when we feel urgency. Many of us struggle with patience, wanting to rush into action, but Esther's story reminds us that divine timing brings divine results. We often see this pattern in the Bible. David was anointed as king as a young shepherd, but he had to wait years before taking the throne. Joseph had prophetic dreams of his future leadership, but he endured betrayal and prison before stepping into his destiny. Even Jesus did not begin his public ministry until the appointed time. In our own lives, we must learn to trust God's timing rather than forcing events. Whether it's a career move, a relationship, or a major decision, waiting on God can mean the difference between failure and success. If you're in a season of waiting, don't see it as a delay, see it as preparation. When God's timing aligns with your purpose, no force on earth can stop his plan from unfolding. 2. Esther was incredibly brave, but courage alone would not have saved the Jews. She needed strategy. If she had immediately accused Haman before the king, it could have backfired. Instead, she carefully crafted a scenario that exposed Haman's wickedness at the right moment, when the king's emotions were fully engaged. This teaches us that wisdom is just as important as boldness. Many people believe that speaking up is the key to success, but how you speak and when you speak are just as critical. Proverbs 4 verse 7 reminds us, "Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore, get wisdom." In life, we face battles in our careers, relationships, and personal struggles. Many of these battles are not won by force but by wisdom. Knowing when to speak and when to be silent, when to act and when to wait, can make all the difference. Jesus himself demonstrated this. When confronted by the Pharisees, he did not always respond immediately. Sometimes, he answered with questions. Other times, he wrote in the sand. He understood that wisdom disarms opposition more effectively than argument. Are you facing a battle today? Instead of reacting impulsively, ask God for wisdom. James 1 verse 5 promises that he gives wisdom generously to those who ask. Victory often belongs to those who think, not just those who fight. 3. Haman built gallows intending to destroy Mordecai, but in the end, he was the one who was executed on them. This is a powerful example of God's justice. Psalm 7 verses 15 to 16 says, "He who digs a hole and scoops it out falls into the pit he has made. The trouble he causes recoils on himself." When people plot against God's children, they often set themselves up for their own downfall. Haman's arrogance and hatred blinded him, leading him straight into his own destruction. The very weapon he crafted against the Jews became his own undoing. We see this pattern throughout the Bible. Pharaoh drowned in the Red Sea he used to pursue the Israelites. The lions Daniel was thrown to ended up devouring his accusers. Even Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, met a tragic end. This lesson is a reminder that we don't need to fight our battles in our own strength. When injustice rises against us, our first instinct is often to retaliate or defend ourselves. But the story of Esther shows that God is always at work behind the scenes, turning the schemes of the enemy back on them. If you are facing injustice, remember, God sees, God knows, and God will act. The trap set against you will not prosper. Instead, God will use it to bring about his justice. 4. At first glance, Esther's role in history seems to begin when she became queen. But her journey started long before that. She was faithful in small things, obeying her cousin Mordecai, following customs, and walking in humility. Because of her obedience in the little things, she was prepared when a great assignment came. This teaches us that God often calls us to faithfulness before he calls us to greatness. Many people want to do something significant for God but struggle with the basics: consistency in prayer, honesty in small matters, diligence in daily responsibilities. But as Luke 16 verse 10 says, "Whoever is faithful with little will be faithful with much." The same applies to Mordecai. When he discovered a plot to kill the king, he didn't ignore it, he reported it. At the time, his actions seemed small, but later, that act of faithfulness led to his promotion and played a role in saving the Jewish people. God often uses the small acts of today to prepare us for the calling of tomorrow. If Esther had not been faithful in the quiet, she would not have been effective in the crisis. Are you being faithful in your current season? It may not seem significant now, but God is using it to shape your future. 5. Perhaps the greatest lesson from Esther's feast is this: no human power can stop the plans of God. Haman held the highest position in the kingdom after the king. He had the authority, the resources, and the king's decree on his side. Yet, despite his influence, his plans were completely overturned. When God declares something, no enemy, no law, and no force of darkness can prevent it. Isaiah 14 verse 27 says, "For the Lord Almighty has purposed, and who can thwart him? His hand is stretched out, and who can turn it back?" Even when it seemed like Haman had won, God was still orchestrating events. Esther's courage, Mordecai's faithfulness, and the king's restless night were all pieces of a divine puzzle. This is a powerful encouragement for us today. When we look at the world around us, it may seem like evil has the upper hand. But God's plan is never in danger. He is always working, even when we cannot see it. If you're in a situation where it feels like the enemy is winning, remember the story of Esther. No decree, no plot, and no earthly power can cancel the purposes of God. If he has declared your victory, nothing can stand against it. And so, the very trap Haman set for Mordecai became his own downfall. Esther's wisdom, patience, and faithfulness led to the salvation of her people, proving that God works behind the scenes, even when all seems lost. Esther's story is a powerful reminder that God's timing is perfect, his justice is sure, and when we step out in faith, he fights on our behalf. You may not be facing a king's court or an enemy's plot, but your challenges are just as real. Like Esther, you may be called to stand in courage, use wisdom, and trust in God's unseen hand. But here's the question: what is your such a time as this moment? Where is God calling you to be bold, to act in wisdom, or to trust him completely? Subscribe to Scriptures in Pictures TV for more powerful animated Bible stories that bring God's word to life. Like and share this video so more people can experience the story of Esther in a fresh and captivating way. Comment below, what stood out to you the most from Esther's story? How has God worked behind the scenes in your life? The story of Esther is not just history, it's a call to action. Will you be the Esther of your generation? Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode from Scriptures in Pictures TV. See you in the next powerful Bible story.